Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin.
Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored, the podcast where filters are left at the door and tech leaders tell it like it is. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, serial tech entrepreneur, 30 companies under my belt. My new book, Fail Hard, Win Big, came out here in July of 2025. It's my story of having 30 ventures with 20 of those failing, but 10 of those being wild successes. The secret behind every company I've built is custom software. That's the difference maker that many leaders overlook. Now I'm the CEO of Sonotified Technology, where we help companies build enterprise software faster, smarter, and without the corporate BS. This show is not about buzzwords. It's about real conversations with tech leaders in the trenches. Today, I am here with Derek Bronston, who has been an engineer, multi-time CTO, everything you name it with engineering. He's touched it, done it, built it, scaled it, and even had it sold off. Derek, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Nice to be here.
Derek, please give our listeners a background of your career and what's led you to your current role.
Yeah, so like I wrote my first piece of software, I think I was 12 or 13, probably 1980, basic. My parents' Atari 800, I think it was.
That's
yeah. It was a database program. I didn't really understand at the time. Anyways, but professionally, honestly, my first professional engineering job was in 97 or 98. And it sort of progressed from there. I was a contractor. I started off kind of doing front end and then spent 10 years basically in the lamp world of the 97 to 2005, and then into the mobile world. I built one company called Yabla, which is still going strong. It's a language learning company, and then I started another company called The Conspiracy, which was sort of an agency, and we did innovation projects, and around 2006. And then I eventually left there and joined this company for a while, it was a social network. We had like 5 million users. And from there, I went to Freshly and helped them build up. We went from, selling something like 20,000 meals a week to multiple millions, and exited to Nestle in 2020, I think it was 1.5 billion. And then I followed the CEO, Mike Weistrach, from Freshly over to Petfolk, which is the company I'm at now, which is veterinary care, but vet tech. It's very, it's got definitely has a physical component. We have, pet care centers, but we also have a very technologically advanced support system.
Derek, I have 2 dogs. Tell me the Petfolk experience here.
I also have 2 dogs. The way I describe Petfolk is this: imagine if you took your dog to the Apple store. Like, you walk in, it's very pretty. They don't have phones ringing. There's everything's very designed. The experience is designed. It's very, top tier medical. It's friendly. So it's a very good, thought through all the way from every user experience, from the app to the experience in the clinic, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a good place to work. It's a really good place to work.
And so how do you drive technology in a vet clinic where you have brick and mortar clinics?
Yeah, there's a lot of technology in there. Let's say we take a step back. So we're building a lot of places. So I'm involved, I run the engineering team, but I also run the IT team and the data team and the product team and market team as well. So
that's a lot under your belt.
Yeah, it's a lot under my belt. So, we built 12, or we launched 12 new facilities this year. So there's, getting it from, lease signing to construction to the IT setup to supporting it in-house. So, we have the typical tech stack, in the clinic, and computers, and then there's, AI driven veterinary equipment, blood sampling, radiology, all that kind of stuff. So they've got some pretty high tech analytics devices that we haven't necessarily built those, but we're using that. There's a lot of AI mixed in with the workflows within the clinics as well.
Okay.
Well, there's also consumer application, website, Android app, iOS app. We're also, always trying to improve the user experience by analyzing all the data around, you know, the appointment time and how are things flowing and are we providing the best care, and using analytics among other things to support making decisions.
Gotcha. So, and I always like to ask people, being a CTO, being a tech leader, man, it's been a brutal couple years. I mean, CTOs, CIOs, they're blamed for everything. The shelf life is often very short. And it's interesting. So I always like to ask guests how they obtain their current role. And so you followed your existing CEO from your company. They obviously had the faith in you to take you to their next venture, which is certainly a good thing.
Yeah, and I didn't join as the CEO. I mean, the CTO joined. It's sort of I followed a similar path as Freshly, where I came in and I was sort of promised long term, growth, but I built a lot of the system. I built the iOS app and lots of the Android app and things like that, and then built up a mobile team, and then built up the front end team, and kind of ended up taking over the entire consumer platform at Freshly, and
Okay.
then and similar, that's kind of similar to where I was at Petfolk too. When I came in, they had just opened. They basically had one shop, or one clinic, and now we have 35. So there was a lot to do. So you know, I'm a CTO, and my day to day right now is, I'm not coding or anything like that, but I like to keep my chops up. And, when I came in, I built the iPhone app. I, set up the team, got the process for the engineering team running, but I was deep in the trenches, even at a code level, and then slowly built up the team and kind of got all the processes running. And now it's fully delegated out. And yeah, I mean, it's been a while since then.
So, what are some current projects you're working on?
I mean, I would say, there's a lot of, we have a lot of projects going, but obviously in this current environment, a big project is thoughtfully integrating with AI throughout all the different workflows within the company,
And that's an overwhelming statement to say the least.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure that could be an episode in and of itself. So, at an engineering level, at a product level, within the clinics, examining, what is the workflow that's happening for X, Y, and Z group, and can we, automate out some of this using AI tooling? I mean, there's a lot of obviously, I don't know if pressure is the right word, but emphasis on integrating with new technologies. And so spending a lot of time on that front. And in regards to engineering, for me, the important thing is how do you integrate with a tool that's that powerful and either maintain or increase quality? Because I can see one thing that will happen in the future is where people who are younger potentially could start using that tool and probably lose quality, right? If you don't have as much hands-on knowledge. And also, understanding how to work with it. It outputs a lot of information, right? So it's about developing, how do you develop a workflow where you're not getting diminishing returns? Because essentially what you're trying to do is save cognitive load for the harder problems and offload some of the easier problems to the AI. But, you still need to review all that code, make sure all that code is meeting your standards. You can get diminishing returns, I feel, if you're outputting too much and just, getting tired doing the reviews as opposed to doing the code. You know what I mean? So it's a
AI is
thoughtful process.
it's a big help, but it's not replacing talented engineers or other people to make sure to manipulate the output in the right way.
Yeah, you get in what you get out what you put into it.
Right.
So I mean, I'm an optimist about it. I like it, but for me, in a perfect world, it allows you to focus more strategically and on architecture and creating more refined architectures and specifications and sort of offloading some of the, things that you can automate out. And so then ideally you would drive up quality or at least maintain it. And I'm thinking more from a senior engineer perspective. So the senior engineers are basically, fully just operating more as architects and reviewers and sort of
So,
managing.
talk to us about your current software engineering team. And I know you have a lot. You have product, you have data, you even have marketing. On the software engineering side, tell us about your team, how you run it.
So I have a pretty loyal following. My team is pretty much at all ex Freshly people. So I haven't actually hired a new person or someone that I didn't know in a while.
Okay. So you've had your team follow you through ventures.
Yeah,
That's
you know, well, what I've found, I mean, it's about who you hire, right? But I find that at least for the kind of engineers that I like, they appreciate a well-defined process and they appreciate being given the time to execute things at a quality level. And so that's what I try. I did this with Freshly too, but I try to provide an environment that's very engineer first. So we're not I'm not saying we never cut a corner, but the intention is we're not cutting corners. We're thinking about quality. We're thinking about performance. We're writing, tests, and we're delivering as bug-free a code as possible. So
And are you guys a fully remote environment?
all of my ICs are remote. We do have a New York office, so we're kind of two headquarters. The corporate headquarters is in New York City, and the operations headquarters in Florida. My engineers are all remote, but some of the directors and some of the corporate people are in New York. And I don't live in New York City anymore, but I go into the office once or twice a week.
Gotcha.
So it's a hybrid, but the engineers currently are.
And do you have engineers onshore, offshore, nearshore?
I mean, they're all in Poland, basically. So whatever shore you consider that.
I guess from the US, that would be offshore.
Yeah, they're offshore. And I mean, some of the best engineers, like literally all of them have been with me pretty much for almost 10 years.
How are you handling the time zone challenges of people in Poland, which no doubt phenomenal developers, the biggest challenge is time zone when you have US teams that they're collaborating with?
I get up early.
Okay.
But also, I mean, the director of engineering, I had a shift. The director of engineering initially, who was here before I was here, is no longer here, and I have a director that's in Poland. So I have it delegated out. So that kind of works out for me. But even prior to that, I get up early. They tailor their schedule a little bit to get off a little bit later in the afternoon, but also products in the States. So I find that if you're delivering them really clearly defined specifications and designs and things like that, you can minimize the meetings. I keep the engineers out of as many meetings as possible. I mean, my life is about meetings, but theirs is not. Theirs is about working,
You got to give them that time to put the headphones on and get in the zone, right?
Yeah. So I haven't really found it to be a problem with the time zone, but I mean, I have been dealing with it I joined Freshly in 2015. So it's been 10 years with kind of, a remote crew, although Freshly had kind of a half and half crew. And even before that, I've always had kind of some remote people.
Gotcha. Now, so you've had engineers that have been with you for 5, 10 years. What are the key traits you look for in engineers?
Number one, can you solve a problem? Can you articulate how you're going to solve that problem? Do you understand performance? And do you write scalable, testable code? I mean, I could get in, and then obviously, if you have domain expertise in whatever domain, but that's kind of a given. So if I have an Android developer, obviously they're an Android developer. I'm not really hiring generalists. Although at a certain point, I think when you've done it long enough, all the people that I have are quite senior. I think you can jump from place to place a little bit more. Like my Android engineer oftentimes is jumping into the back end at this point. Things like that.
Gotcha. So you've been doing this a long time, Derek. I always joke that you learn from your failures, you learn from the challenges. What are some brutal lessons you wish you would have learned earlier in your career?
When I was younger, I mean, I think it's important to be able to admit when you're wrong and learn from your mistakes. I think now that's not an issue. I think when I was younger, and I was managing people. I think it's an art to manage and an art to lead. It's the same thing if you're teaching, right? Sometimes you can have a teacher, I don't know, you took guitar lessons or something, and there's people who teach who they're good at the thing, but they're not actually good at teaching. And I think you can be a manager, but not actually interested in managing. And I was a manager, I was a CTO in my company that I started a long time ago. So I was the default manager, but I didn't really understand what it meant to do that. And so, 15 years later, after doing it for a long time, I feel that I understand better, although I'm always trying to grow, how to lead and how to manage. And I treat it's a different job.
Well, and especially for software engineers who are hands on people, it does get harder to move up to manage others and continue through those levels. It takes a different set of skills.
Yeah, I mean, I always describe it in this way. When you're an IC, you're designing and building systems that run on machines. And when you're a manager or a leader, you're designing or building systems that are the people that build those machines. So now it's, human system design, social system design, basically. I have different teams now. I didn't always have the product team and the marketing teams in my past lives, but I find similar problems no matter what the type of team is. They're obviously their output is different. You're trying to get code out of an engineer and product definitions out of a product person and lower CAC out of a marketer or whatever. So like the goal that you're driving is different, but the same sort of human problems persist. It all boils down to, for me, it's all about clarity. Can you articulate clearly the goal, the why, the what, and the how of the thing that you're trying to do?
Gotcha. So what's the biggest challenges you're dealing with now?
It's always that challenge where um, just uh, as you grow, so we've grown quite a bit. We went from one clinic to 35, and we're going to keep growing, scaling the org, getting new people, evaluating processes as you go, and keeping everything on track. I'm not feeling specifically like a giant technical challenge aside from the AI thing, how to integrate that into, a workflow. To me, that's more of a workflow problem than a particular technical challenge because I'm not writing the AI, but it's always a challenge when you're scaling to just, it's fun, but you're dealing with different teams, different humans, different problems, and reevaluating, your processes and your systems. Another thing that I always like to say is that I'm all about process, but bad process is bad. So to me, a process is only as good as it is easy to modify. So can you easily roll with the change, adopt your system, and then have it scale better? Same thing with code. Right? If you write very messy code and you're writing something, and you don't know, you're causing a crash in a system, and you can't find that, the culprit because you just created like a spaghetti. It's the same thing with human systems. Although I think human systems turn into spaghetti quicker than code at this point.
So you've been involved, Derek, for software engineering for a few decades now. What has changed the most about engineers and leading engineering teams 10 years ago versus today?
Well,
Besides that little culprit AI.
yeah, besides AI. I mean, actually, I'm not sure how much has changed in 10, but in 20, it's changed a lot. Going back to the Web 1, I mean, computer science hasn't really changed much. If you start thinking about it and you break it down to the bare bones, things, the math, machines are getting faster and we have more storage, but it's still it's really the same logic, right? Things are still functioning on Unix, built off of C, whatever. But I do think that, and this is a positive change, people in my generation, I don't like the younger people understand performance, understand writing tests. They're much more fastidious, I think, than it was 20 years ago. I mean, I'm sure there were people that were fastidious and you went, there was computer science school and you came out, but it wasn't, there's just so much more, there's just so many more defined standards. The standards, when my first web job, CSS was new. 97 or something, 98. When I remember going into this, it was this big company and I was doing this front end web work and people were talking about, oh, CSS is really cool because you can control the styles. I mean, obviously we're well past that. So I think having all of these defined standards is, helping things. I mean, the problem has also changed. I think that, in 97, 98, even earlier, you built everything and now it's a mix, right? You're integrating with tooling, frameworks, well-defined libraries. You're, interacting less with the raw. You're, you know, you're not like sitting in C and just developing like super to the metal code, for the most part. And so I think that's a big change. There's just so many more products and they add problems, whatever. And so got like installing their NPM thing, and It's, yeah, okay, but did you actually, I mean, this is a challenge with the young people, is like they want the new shiny thing and they want to install it, and they're not going to, you do need to review, I think it's a security nightmare out there happening because there's so many like frameworks and things that people just, are downloading and installing. I think that's gotten better in the past 10 years though as well, I think. But that's a thing that, is a challenge.
So as a tech leader, as a CTO, I mean, you've been through a lot of companies, including one that sold to $1.5 billion that was technology driven company. What advice do you have for others on how to excel as a tech leader 20 beyond?
I mean, first and foremost is, if you are a tech leader, staying in touch with the tech. I think, you don't want to, I'm always trying to stay on, in touch with whatever the new thing is, keeping your chops up to a certain extent. And, you will need to be able to understand what's going on. You can get really separated from it if you're only meeting with the business leaders all the time. You're not, getting into the trenches. It's a balance, right? Because you can't get too into the weeds because you need to be strategic. But I think you need to keep slightly in the weeds so that you don't lose touch with the code. So staying on top of the current trends in technology. And then to me, it's enjoying it. Like, you got to enjoy it. I like it. I like engineering. I like solving problems. So enjoy it, and just constantly working on being able to more clearly articulate how you were going to solve a problem. Like, I think that cuts across, whether it's business or engineering or product. It's always about, can I clearly articulate how to solve this problem? And then just knowing that you're not always right, and that's why you delegate. Hopefully you hire people that are better than you at, you get the top engineer, and hopefully, you don't want yes people. I always tell my engineers that, they're all from Belarus, Poland. So sometimes they're not always the first to complain, but I always say, I want you to tell me when I'm wrong. Like, and it's the same thing. My boss, he wants me to chat, he's hiring me to make decisions so that I have domain expertise over. And my Android developer, whatever, he spends 10 hours a day doing Android. I've done a lot of Android, but if I make a silly suggestion to him, I want him to push back. And push back on product if he says, I don't think this is going to be a good idea for the consumer, but let me hear it. So being able to admit you're wrong.
Well, and having the company culture for that is key, because that's the only way we all get better, is when you have strong teams and you guys can all challenge each other. Derek, great advice. Thank you for getting uncensored with us today. You've been through a lot as an engineering leader. I'm excited to see your current venture, where things continue to go, how you scale it. Thank you for being a guest. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. If you like the show, hit subscribe. If you didn't, well, tell your competitors about it. Well, they could probably use the help. Remember, fail hard, win big, and build what matters. Thank you, everybody.
That's a wrap. Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, my company, Sonatify Technology, we deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.